mobile home parks as well, because the lot rents are so freaking low across the United States, the asset prices are smaller, right? And so it was easier for me to enter into that space than buying a 50 unit apartment building, that's 80, 90,000 a door.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why? Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with Tyler Lekas. Tyler is a mobile home park investor. He started with a career in finance before he got into mobile home park investing in 2018. There's some here about sort of where your parks are located and things like that, Tyler, but I really just love to hear this from your words rather than kind of read out your bio. So let me first just say thank you for coming on the show, taking the time out on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate it very much.
Of course. Yeah, there's no rest for the wicked here. We're all trying to get ahead here. But every day counts.
Yep, exactly. Every day, every hour, it all is towards our future success. So let's just start by hearing about your background and kind of what brought you into real estate, and we'll dive into it. We'll talk about mobile home parks extensively, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Again, I just want to say I really appreciate you having me on here. And again, my name is Tyler Lekas. I'm one of the co-founders of MHCI Group. And where I got started was in finance. I traded fixed income on Wall Street, and I was working 120 hours a week, and didn't like my job, didn't like the work-life balance. Not like I have any better work-life balance, but at least I run my own show now, right? And so I was working, and it just wasn't really working for me. And my dad ended up sending me an article about mobile home parks and kind of the attractive cash flows, et cetera, of the asset class. And he said kind of jokingly, these real estate guys aren't very smart, and he goes, you can do math pretty well, and he goes, you should give this a shot, because it's really just a math problem, right? On each one of these deals. And so I ended up started diving into the asset class. I was living in Dallas, Texas at the time, so I started driving some parks on the weekends, when I wasn't working, and I was like, this is really interesting, and ended up buying my first park in 2018, and since that time. I moved to Florida, self-managed that park. And then I met my business partner, Jason Postill. That's actually a pretty funny story. And then I moved to Arkansas because we were going to do some super, super heavy lifts in Arkansas. And since that time, since I met Jason about 3.5 years, well, Jason was a little bit before that, but since we bought our first park in 2020, we've scaled from basically 68 units in Arkansas to 700 units. So it's we're now the largest private owner of mobile home parks in the state, and it's going well. It's obviously has its challenges and whatnot, but yeah, it's a good asset class, really good.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so first, tell us two things from that before we dive into like the nuts and bolts of mobile home parks. One, you mentioned work-life balance and how you didn't have work-life balance, and now you don't have work-life balance. And it's a funny topic that I think you hear a lot of people that have W-2 jobs and like what you had that complain about work-life balance, but then you don't really hear about that a lot from entrepreneurs. And it's because I think work-life balance probably doesn't really exist. You have to focus on one over the other at different times in whatever stage you're in. But the reality is like generally as an entrepreneur, you're doing something you enjoy and you're passionate about it. And so the balance comes from, or I guess probably the better way to say is the imbalance comes from being stuck doing something that you aren't enjoying. So I just think it's interesting that you say that and you're like, I still don't have work-life balance. It's like, yeah, me neither. But I just enjoy what I'm doing. And so it's kind of, and you have you have more control of it, right? You're making your hours. It's going directly towards what you're trying to accomplish. So, I think it's an interesting point in the way that you said it. And then I wanted to ask you to tell us the story, a funny story about you guys meeting as partners. I think partnerships are probably one of, if not the most important piece of real estate and business ownership and entrepreneurship. So how did that come about for you?
Yeah. So it's pretty funny. For all your listeners out there, I do drink beer. So I was drinking a beer on my couch back in Portland, and I had a house there, and then I rented it out. I did like some Airbnb stuff, whatever. For when I moved to Titusville to self manage that park. So I was home for the holidays. I was drinking a beer with some of my buddies, and I was getting a call from a Titusville number. Or like a Florida number. So I thought it was one of my residents in my park. So I picked it up. And then this guy on the other line goes, "Hey, I'm Jason Postill. That's my business partner. I'm with JP Capital Solutions." And JP Capital Solutions he runs a boutique brokerage in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And I'm like, yeah, great. Another broker calling to buy my park. And I'm like, all right, spit it out. What's your number? And he was like, okay, well, how many units do you have? What's the lot rent? Are you billing back sewer, water? Yada, yada. Went through all the questions. And he's like, well, I'll give you X price. And I said, well, that's what we paid 6 months ago. And so sharpen your pencil. And click, I hung up the phone. Well, 5 seconds later, I'm getting a call from the same number. And how I cut my teeth was I came up, I made 29,000 phone calls my first year in the business as a financial advisor to basically build my book of business. And so I was like, this guy's calling back. That's what I would always do, right? Like I'd get hung up on, and I'd call back, and then I'd go, oh, sorry, sir, we got disconnected. And then people would be like, F you, I hung up on you, and click, I'd call back again, oh, sir, yeah. Because I wanted to get out what I wanted to say. And Jason's the same way. I was like, I like that tenacity, So I was like, I hope this guy out. And because I was pretty rude to him on the phone. I said some cuss words and some other things. So, so it was funny because I spent every nickel I had, I was Ubering and doing a courier service for human organs around the state of Florida to make ends meet after I bought that park, because I literally had no money left. And so Jason had some capital, and he said, we ended up going through basically a 2-year process of trying to buy our first park. So we got our teeth kicked in on multiple deals, and he also had some capital. So I saw that tenacity, and then he had some capital on the sidelines, and he's kind of a buy and hold guy, just like I am, right? Like I view these as legacy assets for my kids. And so we're a lot of guys out there, big IRR guys. So they're like, look, if we can sell this in 8 months for a huge IRR, we'll do that. Right? That's just not Jason and myself, So there's a lot of synergies there. And I haven't met anybody. I'm not smart. I'm not athletically gifted. I don't really have any talents. My only talent was working really, really hard. And Jason has that same sort of drive. So there was some synergies there. He's up at 2:00 in the morning, and he's back up at 6:00 the next day, and he's grinding through stuff. So anyways, that was the funny story, and that's how we kind of came together. And he does a lot of the smart guy stuff. I just am a door kicker here on the ground. I do a lot of the construction and whatnot. So he does systems and books and all that stuff. So
yeah. Well, I mean, this. I know it's the funny story, but actually, like a really important piece in terms of talking about partnerships and the formation of them and everything. And the just a couple of things that you said that stand out really is, one, it sounds like you have complementary strengths. You're both doing sort of different pieces of the business, but a shared value system and a shared goal. And it's just kind of like that's exactly what you need. That's the key to partnership and having it go well. And it doesn't mean, when partnerships don't work out, it doesn't mean that one person was good or bad. It means like that you didn't have those particular pieces of the puzzle that fit together. It's like you just maybe that it's carrying over the puzzle analogy, but maybe that's a piece of the puzzle from a different puzzle. So it's just kind of I appreciate you talking through that, because I actually think, despite it being a funny story, and yeah, we all I don't want to get called back when I hang up with. I try not to hang up on people, but that cold call. But yeah, I definitely don't want them to call back.
Yeah.
So it is, but yeah, that's what kind of what you have to do, right? Like if you're in a cold calling position, let's just say you get past the point of caring about that, no. So your dad told you, numbers, you're good, real estate guys don't know anything. Why don't you go into mobile home parks? Why
Yeah.
mobile home parks?
Yeah, so it was really just the article, and then I started diving into mobile home parks, and then I did some comparative analysis to kind of like multifamily and industrial, and what other asset class? Oh, and self storage. And for me, it was like I liked. I mean, where I really wanted to be at was um, where somebody lived. And I knew it was going to be tough, right? Because where people live, there's a lot of moving pieces, et cetera. And so I wanted to be where somebody lived because self storage to me, if public storage decides to come build one next to you, they can just wait you out, right? They can build one right next to you. It's a newer facility. They can drop their rates, 30, $40 a month below yours. They'll take all your customer base, drive you out of business, and then jack the rates back up. I did not like that. I did not like the low barriers to entry in self storage. Industrial just seemed too expensive for kind of where I was at with my own capital situation, as well as the people that I knew in the space. So I don't really know how to enter into that space. And I wasn't an expert rehab guy, so I didn't know how to take like a class C industrial, rehab it, and then bring it back to life. And I felt like that was pretty capital intensive as well. And then multi, I was comparing kind of the mobile home park space and the multi-space, and the multi-space seemed to me it was around a 50% expense ratio because you had to take care of what is it, the three T's. I know you're in multi. Was it termites
and toilets?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, at the time I was a novice. I was like, well, those guys are operating around a 50% expense ratio, and what I was told, and it's more than this, but what I was told it was 30% for mobile home parks. Really, our portfolio in Arkansas operates at about a 39.7% expense ratio. So
Okay.
it's there's the spread is not as great as I thought originally.
Yeah.
And so that's why I got into mobile home parks and mobile home parks as well, because the lot rents are so freaking low across the United States. The asset prices are smaller, right? And so it was easier for me to enter into that space than buying a 50 unit apartment building, that's 80, 90,000 a door, So those are kind of all the factors that went into that. And I did some comparative analysis, or what I thought was comparative analysis at the time. And it's not that I think multi guys are super smart. I think that's a great asset class to be in, to be honest with you. It was just the mobile home parks I kind of started buying, and we're pretty comfortable with the space. And we've definitely underwritten some apartments, but we just can't seem to make the pencils work as well as mobile home parks. So that was kind of the A to Z.
Yeah. No, that's also a great sort of summary comparison of some of the strengths and of pros and cons of the different asset classes. And I told you before we started recording, mobile home parks has been really kind of a compelling space for me. We have some self-storage. We mainly focus on multifamily. Mobile home parks, like one of those things that I'm like, for a lot of the reasons you just listed, I didn't know about the expense ratio. That actually makes me even more interested. But the just it almost seems like it's somewhere between self-storage and multifamily in the sense. Now I'm curious how you guys do this, but I've heard a couple of different ways, and what I've heard, whether this is true or not, is like the best way to do mobile home parks is to only own the pad and don't own the actual home.
Oh yeah.
And because well, I'll let you tell me why. I mean, you agree, so tell me why do you say that?
Yeah. So basically, mobile home park, I won't sugarcoat it for you or your listeners. Mobile home park renters are the worst renters on the planet. I mean, they destroy everything. They don't care about anything you have in there, and they just wreck it. I mean, they are horrible. So with that, you probably have an overall higher expense ratio than you really do in multifamily, because those renters are literally going to decimate. Every time you have a move out, the place is going to be freaking destroyed.
Yeah.
And so if you just own the pad, right, you basically you drop your expense ratio from probably mid 50s to 40s, right, or high 30s, low 40s, and then you actually have some economies of scale, because the other issue in mobile home parks is in an apartment building, right? If you bought a 100-unit apartment building, right, rents are 1,000, right? So to pay somebody a living wage out of that gross income, it's much easier to pay somebody 50 grand a year, right, to go through and do maintenance or lease up or whatever, right? Because you just have more economies of scale. You have you have higher rents, which allows for larger gross income, which means you can build in higher fixed costs into your P&L, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a 100-space mobile home park that's at $300 lot rent, it's much harder to pay somebody $50,000 a year, right? And so, and what I mean by a scalable business is if you own all the homes, right, all the park-owned homes, you're just not grossing enough to hire a full-time maintenance guy to go in there and fix all that stuff. So it's going to crush your business model. It really is. So that's why you own the dirt. And is it like that on every park? In every park, it's not, right? You're gonna deal with park-owned homes. People are going to abandon their homes. You're gonna have to bring in homes on vacant pads when the homes burn down because somebody leaves a space heater on, and you're gonna have to refill those homes, So you're always going to be dealing with park-owned homes in the space. It's just there's no way around it unless you buy something a 4-cap in St. Augustine, Florida, or a 5-cap in the Chicago MSA or whatever, right? You're going to have to buy all tenant-owned homes at a very, very, very low cap rate. And so we buy distressed or underutilized assets with issues within the property as well as issues within the expenses, and we turn them around, and that's where to us, that's where the value is, right? So that's why you don't own the homes, because it'll destroy the business model unless you're just a mom and pop and you go out there and you've got 30 years worth of construction experience. You go fix everything yourself. You use your own human capital to juice the P&L because you don't have to pay anybody to do it. That works, but I wouldn't recommend that for any of your listeners. It's buying the job,
Yeah, it's hard to be the person. It's hard to come in and be the person who's owned it for 30 years and doesn't have a mortgage or anything like that on it. They just, right. This is kind of their baby. So I understand, sort of the value add strategy that you have now. When you're looking at these parks, do you ever are there instances where you would buy them and they are park owned homes, or there are some park owned homes and you just try to convert it to not, like, how do you, I don't know, what the existing inventory of mobile home parks looks like in terms of how that's structured. So I'm asking, I guess my question is, do you come in and change that entire structure, or you're only looking at mobile home parks where the homes are not owned by the owner?
Yeah, it would be almost impossible for us to buy a park, especially in the Southeast, that didn't have park-owned homes in it, because so many of these owners, what they were construction guys or carpenters or whatever. They were good with their hands, and then they said, "Oh wow, lot rents." Well, in the South they were crazy low. I mean, most of the properties we've bought in Little Rock had sub $200 lot rents. If you can believe that. We actually bought a park, a 33-space park that had $90 lot rents. The guy hadn't collected a single dollar of rent from the property in a decade, and he hadn't raised the lot rent in 30 years. He had no idea who was living at the park, and he had not collected a dollar rent in a decade. So, anyways, that's another interesting story. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a wild story. But yeah, so what we do is we look for, basically we're always looking at the entry price, right? If we can get in at 20 or sub 20 a pad in Little Rock, basically we've moved the entire market in Little Rock from the low, the high 100s, low 200s to 350. And on the whole portfolio, because we own basically the entire Little Rock Metro. There's a couple of large institutional players now that are breaking into some of those bigger assets, but we own majority of the properties in Little Rock. And we'll move those to probably 400 next year. So if we can get in sub 20 a pad, our cash on cash returns are almost guaranteed, unless there's some major problem, to be double digits within the first 90 days once we push lot rents. So we like that, right? And you asked about conversions, right? Converting park-owned homes. Like if we buy a park with park-owned homes in it, how do we convert them? So again, another funny story, and a story that I'm going to tell because it's what you don't want to do when you take over a property with park-owned homes in it. So we took over a park. It's a 35 space park, and we took it over for $675,000. And the only reason I'm telling you the price is because the price is the only thing that saved us in the end. And it was 100% park-owned homes when we took it over. And what we did was, because we were novices, it was our first 100% park-owned home park. We basically said, hey, either you convert to a lease with option to purchase, and all a lease with option to purchase is the tenant leases the home from you for, we'll say, 60 months at a particular price, and then on month 60 they buy the house from you for $1. And the reason we do lease with option to purchase is because it gets us around the SAFE Act and Dodd-Frank. So now we're not mortgage originators. It's not a straight line amortization to 60 months. Right? Because if they're just paying $800 a month for 60 months, then you can be considered a mortgage. You're basically doing a mortgage. But with that being at month 59, the payments stop, and then at month 60 they buy it from you for $1. Right? They exercise their option to purchase. Gets around. So just a word to the wise for your listeners out there: you got to be worried about Dodd-Frank and SAFE Act because you aren't selling like a physical house. Right? Those mobile homes, they fall under house even if they are chattel. So we told everybody, convert to LOPs or get the hell out in 90 days. And everybody got the hell out in 90 days. So we were left with a park that was like 50 or 60% vacant. So now we had to, and just to let you know, the types of folks that left, like I got a call in the middle of the night from our manager that was there because a guy was taking a shotgun and blowing holes in the walls with his shotgun, and the pellets were hitting his neighbors' houses. So when we got into these homes, they were destroyed. We'll put it that way. And so we had to rehab all these vacant park-owned homes that people had taken sledgehammers to the toilets, poured cement down the sewer lines, shot holes in the walls. I mean, it was a nightmare. But we bought it at such a discounted price that that's what saved us. And so we went in there and we rehabbed a lot of the homes. The other nuance to that property was a lot of those homes were 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1476s. And the reason I give those specifications is because a 3-bedroom, 2-bath is the most popular home in America. And if you're looking to fill it up with any sort of family, and Hispanics are a huge market in Little Rock, and they're a great tenant base, you want those 3-bedroom, 2-baths. And they all had, I'm sure you've seen them, like Trailer Park Boys and Tops. You've probably seen those, the mobile homes with the flat metal roofs. Yeah. Well, all of these had pitched roofs, and that's a big deal. That means they were all like post 1995. So when we went to go rehab them, they got leased up almost immediately, right? So these people moved out. We ended up renovating all the park-owned homes. They got leased up immediately, and some were bought for cash. And the reason we could refill them is because they were attractive floor plans and they were newer, bigger models. We had that same story with a park with older they were beat up mobile homes. And the problem is we still haven't gotten that park all the way occupied. And we bought that thing 3 years ago because the older park-owned homes, nobody wanted. And it costs 20 or 30% more to fix those up because the wiring's old, the roof's caving in. I mean, everything's shot on it. So you have a choice of either tearing those down, right, or leaving them there and trying to rehab them. right? So those are the nuances in park owned homes. When you're looking at a park and you're trying to convert those, go slow. Look at the age of the homes, because the age of the homes is going to tell you whether you're going to need to rip those homes out or you can leave them there and they're actually going to get sold, right? Because you don't want to dump $25,000 into a 2-1 that's going to rent for $550 a month, right? It just doesn't make any sense, right? You'd rather dump 25,000 into a 3-2 that's a 95 or a 2,000, right? That doesn't have all the problems, and you're going to lease that for $850, $900 a month, right? So that, for your listeners out there, that's how you would go in and do it slow, convert those guys to a LOP, or if you can sell them for cash, sell them for cash, and look at the age of the houses, because that's really going to tell you how much capex you're going to need to effectively convert that asset.
That's fascinating. You mentioned just like demolish it. So if you were in that scenario, would you potentially consider just tearing out if they're old and really damaged? Would you tear them out and just put something that's the more desirable option there, or I guess this is a tie-in question: do the residents ever bring their own home in, or are you supplying the home that you then sell or lease to them?
Yeah, so since 2008, and chattel lending's basically gone to zero, or chattel lenders have basically told us that, or basically told our residents, or the class of residents that usually like to live in mobile home parks, kind of lower income, there's almost no way that normal folks can put the down payments and pay the interest rates that chattel lenders want these days. So chattel lending really has dried up for the income, for the tenant base that comes into mobile home parks. So if you build it, they will not come. It just like, so if you have a vacant pad there, so I'll just give you an example. We have 700 units, and we've been basically buying these properties in Arkansas for the last 3.5 years, right? In that time span, we've had 3 organic move-ins. 3. So if you think you're going to fill up a lot of vacant pads in your park by advertising or giving free lot rent, or even the ability to move, we put out bandit signs saying a year of free lot rent, we'll move your house in for free, and we'll hook it all up to utilities, and we still have got nothing. So and again, if you're in Orlando, Florida, if you're in San Diego, if you're in a super, super strong market, then you're probably going to have a different experience than us. But if you're in the middle of the country, if you're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Little Rock, Mobile, Alabama, just tertiary markets, you're going to have a hell of a time. I would not bank on that. So that's just what we've experienced here in Arkansas. I'm not saying Arkansas is the strongest market. So that's definitely. You had another question, so I'm sorry about that, Jason.
Oh, no, you're good. No, this is great. I'm fascinated by all this. So the goal is not to own the homes; it's to have the residents own them, but they won't move them in. So you have to move them in and then get them to buy the home from you is kind of the idea.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So, and how we do that is, well, for you or for your listeners out there, right? You've got 2 different options, really. You can go new homes, and that's going to branch you into some more decision trees, or you've got used homes. So I'll go with the new homes first to just kind of tell you what we do, and then obviously explore your own options out there. I'd always recommend that. So new homes, we go through the 21st Mortgage Cash Program that's owned by Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett. And the 21st Mortgage Cash Program, what they do is they're a chattel lender, and they basically say you can buy homes from the factory floor, right? So you have to get your dealer's license. And so for you or for your listeners out there, make sure you check into your dealer's license before you buy a park, because in Arkansas it took us like almost 6 months to get our dealer's license. Okay. So we were anticipating ordering homes like week 1 and filling up our first park, and it was like 6 months in. So it completely screwed up our model and everything else. And so you have to get your dealer's license. And then the 21st Mortgage Cash Program makes you sign a personal guarantee on the loan. And then you order those homes from whatever dealer or whatever manufacturer is close to you. We order from Dresden, Tennessee, Champion up there. And they will cover 100% of the cost of the house and the delivery of the house. So they'll build that into the loan. So you come out zero for the delivery and the house. So if it's 40 grand for the house, 5,000 for delivery, you're going to finance that, $45,000 over a 15-year AM, probably at 9 to 10%, depending on how many homes you order, yada yada yada. Okay. So that's how we get new homes there. And we found the new home inventory not only boosts the quality of the clientele, but it also boosts the assets, so the appraisal value that's going to come out on the back end. The problem is if you need the yield, right? The math there is if you can rent a new home out, we'll just say for $900. The chattel debt, if you're ordering a $45,000 house, is probably going to be about $450 a month, and then another $50 for insurance. So immediately off the top, you're only collecting $400, and then you're on a 40% expense ratio. So if you do a used home, so I'll segue into used homes, you can buy used homes for, $5,000 to $20,000 cash, and then you got to ship them to your property. That's another $3,500, and then you got to put skirting steps, utility hookups, and HVAC on. And we spend about $15K on that. So if you buy a house for $5,000, ship it into your park for $35,000, right? You're into it for $8,500, and then you're into it for another $15K, right? You're into it for $23,500 now. And most of the time, walls fall off, toilets break during the move. You're going to need to do some other stuff. So, usually rehab costs are $5K. So you're into it for $28K. So you got to fill in 10 pads. You're out $280,000. That's a big deal. I mean, for us, It's a big deal.
Yeah. Sure.
So you got to choose between, hey, look, am I going to put in new homes where I get financed at a better rate, or I get a big portion of the home, or all the home finance, I should say. And so I save my capital, but my yield gets crushed by that chattel debt. Or do I want to get used homes where I'm into it for, half the cost, but I got to come out of pocket for the entire thing, right? And so, because again, if you collect, we'll just say $900 for a used home, right? Think about that. That's all going to your bottom line. So it's just whatever math problem you can do, and it depends on your capital situation, really. So that's kind of how we source things. I know I dove down into the nitty gritty there, but hopefully it's valuable to your listeners.
Yeah. So, but I guess in those examples, if I'm understanding correctly, now you are leasing the home, so that the resident is not that the numbers you gave are in that example, right? So if you sell it to them, does it change kind of how that math works, or maybe it kind of works out the same in the end? I don't really know.
For cash?
Yeah.
If I could go sell...
Well, for cash, I think it would be obvious, but I guess if you had to finance it, the lease to purchase, is that a profitable way to do it? I guess, and I'm assuming sometimes you don't have a choice, because if you've got empty pads, you've got to do something to get people in there.
Yeah, so we always LOP all of our homes. When I say rent the house, we always lease with option of purchase. We never do straight rentals. So it's always a lease with option of purchase. So I apologize. I misspoke there. So it's always a lease with option of purchase, and it's always, and so if we're bringing in a new home and we put it on a pad, we always say, we don't do renters. If you want to be a renter, that's not the park for you, right? If you want to own your own home and you want the path to home ownership, then we have a lease with option of purchase, right? We make them put down I would say a sizable deposit. It's all relative, right? But it's usually between $1,000 and $3,000 that they have to put down, depending on the size and age of the home. And that way they feel more compelled to stick around, right? So if something goes bad, right? And the other thing with the lease with option to purchase is the repairs and the maintenance is on the resident. So I don't know if I explained that, and that's a big thing, because, and I'm not saying everybody has to do this. So maybe they have smarter residents in other states. But I've come up with a custom document. It didn't take a brain surgeon to write it, but so many of our residents have gotten confused with the lease with option to purchase versus just being a normal renter, is that I put in like 25 bold on the front of all of our LOP agreements saying, this is a lease with option to purchase. You are on the path to home ownership, right? The repairs and maintenance in this unit are your responsibility from day one until you own it, right? And obviously after that as well, because so many of our residents have gotten confused on LOPs versus just being a normal renter. Because when their hot water heater goes out, they always call us being like, oh, you got to fix my hot water heater. And you're like, well, you're on an LOP, like, it's your responsibility. So, and again, we're not trying to sell somebody a peach and then claim it's an apple. Like, we want everybody to be homeowners, because then it's like, then they'll get mad and then they punch holes in the walls and destroy the place. Right. So anyways, it's just another cautionary tale to your listeners out there that, you may have to really hammer down on those SOPs when your managers are talking to these residents, to hammer that point home. This is an LOP. This is a lease with option to purchase. It is not a rental. So that's just a word to the wise.
No, I would imagine that would definitely be important to have as front and center, like, this is on you. So all of your parks basically are in and around Little Rock, and I would assume that is also kind of a strategic advantage. Just having, as you said, you essentially get to set the market in that example. So is it on the, kind of future plans for you to branch out to other markets? You kind of like how things, is there a lot of opportunity still remaining in that area, or what do you see within the market in general, and then also just kind of your own specific plans?
Yeah, so we love Little Rock. There's still a few opportunities that we're looking at. Actually, we're raising capital for 2 deals right now, and one's in like the Little Rock kind of metro. I wouldn't say it's like Little Rock proper, but it's a Little Rock metro. And then another one's up in northeastern Arkansas, which we view as a rapidly growing market with a super, super stable kind of job base, real blue collar job base, which is great for our tenant base and great for a recession as well. Those jobs seem to always kind of stick around. So we love the Little Rock market, and we've branched out actually to Northwest Arkansas. We've branched out to a place called Green Forest, Arkansas. We've branched out to another place called Berryville, Arkansas, Mountain Home, Arkansas, etc. So again, we've branched out to some pretty much the whole state. Hot Springs, Arkansas. So we branched out to, majority of the state. And we are looking right now at a deal in Oklahoma. We are looking at a deal right now in Missouri. And we are looking at a deal right now as well, kind of a one-off deal up in Pennsylvania. So we do like other markets, but to really get our footprint and kind of get us off the ground, you can probably do the math, right? We own 700 units and it's 16 assets. So if you look at that, it's around 40, a little less than 40 units of property. And so what that initially, it was Jason and I just doing everything. And the reason for that is because we couldn't even hire a manager, because you couldn't pay anybody a living wage, right, off of that income, right, that was coming off those first couple of properties. Because we were paying, we had a first lien debt, and then we had equity guys, right, that we were paying a pref to, and then there was basically nothing left after that. And so the goal, or the goal after we figured out that these small properties, even if we were getting them at a significant discount to par, we had to get more of them. We had to get more of these little properties to make all the numbers work. So that's why we gobbled up basically 11 assets in the Little Rock metro to make those numbers work. And now we can actually pay somebody to have them go in and manage those properties and kind of roam around, because you can, properties are right across the street from each other, et cetera. So
Right.
I wouldn't recommend, if you're getting started, to go buy 16 small parks in 16 different states. It won't work.
Right.
You'll get killed. And the only reason that 16, the smaller parks in Little Rock worked is because we got them in a close vicinity, and we got economies of scale. But it's the little parks compared to the large parks are very difficult to manage. Our largest property in our portfolio right now is 122 spaces, and that is a dream compared to our little parks. The little parks are just, you have one capital expenditure. Like we spent just this month, we had a $3,400 sewer bill at one of our 18 space properties, and then a $2,200 sewer bill or water bill at that same property. Well, I mean, that takes out like 3 months worth of revenue,
Right.
a bottom line revenue. I mean, it's terrible. And the big properties, when you get something like that, a $3,400 expense, it doesn't matter. Just build it into the repairs and maintenance. But that property, then we had to go borrow from Peter to pay Paul, right? Borrow from another one of our properties, go pay those sewer bills off. Anyways, so I would recommend highly to your listeners to if they're going to be buying small parks, you better buy them well, and you better be able to kind of amass a scale around them to build in those costs, because they'll eat you alive.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually pretty common theme across asset classes too. It's just there's a reason why at the end of the day most people end up sort of scaling to larger assets, and it's for exactly that reason. It's you have management is easier to afford. It's easier to remove yourself from the day to day on larger assets. It's easier to have those expenses be even the expense, the actual cost of a particular expense might go up, but it's spread across more units, and it's diluted down, so it's not quite so such a brutal hit every time something like that happens, because things like that will always happen. So Tyler, where do you see the market going? How do you envision kind of the future of mobile home parks over the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, the ballpark out there is that 10% of all mobile home parks are owned by institutions. And I would not consider ourselves an institutional player by any stretch of the imagination. Some people in Little Rock might disagree with you, but I don't think we are. 700 units is not a big portfolio by any stretch of the imagination. But I think more and more institutions are going to be gobbling these things up. And just to give you an idea, we just had a property trade, which I have no idea how these guys are making the numbers work, and I'm not going to say their name, but they're pretty easy to find. But they just bought a 220 space property for $13.1 million in Little Rock, $60,000 a space. And their lot rents in there currently are $375 a month. The math just doesn't make any sense. Zero. And they just made another offer on another property for $10 million for 140 spaces. That's $70,000 a space. And to give you an idea, that property we have under contract, that's in a better area. It's still in the Little Rock Metro. It's not Little Rock proper, but it's in the Little Rock Metro. We've got under contract for $5.1 million, and we retraded the guy a couple of times. We reduced that price to get to 5.1 because we were uncomfortable at 5.4 where we were at. And so, and again, I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy on the planet, but I know I can do basic, arithmetic, and so these institutional players are coming, and I think the reason I brought that up is because the institutional players are coming to gobble up this asset class, and there's going to be more consolidation in the future, and those guys are going to push freaking rents. I mean, they're going to push rents.
Yeah.
And we've already seen that. We saw a big institutional player, again, I won't name their name, but they took rents from at a property that we actually took a look at. They bought it for $20 million. We were looking at $9 million. Yeah, back in 21 they bought, or no, I'm sorry, back in 2020, and they bought it in 22. And they took lot rents. It was 225 lot rents, 66% occupied. They took lot rents from 225 to 465 in one go. And supposedly they're going up to 525. Don't know if any of that's true, but I'll keep you updated.
It's impressive.
So yeah, so I know these institutional players are going to come, and the only thing I can say is that I don't agree with the rapid rent increases like that. I do think you bring it to market, but they pushed it above. They probably pushed it $65 above market, where it needed to be, and they probably did do that to make their numbers work. But what I do like is, and again, the listeners that lean a little farther on the left political of the scale, plug your ears. I don't want to hurt your feelings. But the good thing about rent increases is that there's larger NOI. You can get more professional property management, and you can start replacing units and infrastructure in these properties that were built in the 50s. I mean, we've probably replaced 5,000 feet of sewer line in Little Rock right now, or more, because we have replaced so much of that old Orangeburg, clay tile, etc. And the only way that worked was we got lot rents up to 350. We couldn't have afforded it on the 175 lot rent or 150 lot rent, wherever it was at before. So either you let the properties go, and you let the most affordable form of housing in the nation go because you can't fix the sewer lines and all your homes are dilapidated, or you push lot rents and you actually have a clean, nice place to live. You can't have it both ways. You can't have no rental increases, and you can't have a nice, clean place to live. You have to have capital for that. So while I don't agree with all the rental increases these institutional guys are going, I think the market is going to be going to a better place with more professional management and nicer, higher quality assets. And I think within the next 5 years, you'll see the American public really start to kind of turn the page on mobile home parks are dilapidated, and it's where meth heads go, and prostitutes, and whatever, all the low life scum. I think mobile home parks will start to kind of get a new light, and that's because of this institutional capital that's transforming these properties, kind of as we speak, and regional operators like us as well. We have taken some, Southwest Little Rock is where most of our properties are, and that always has the, it's always in the top 10 of highest murders per capita in the country. I mean, it beats out Southside Chicago. And we went in there and we did some heavy lifts where, I got guns pulled on me and guys took swings at me and whatever. Anyways, lots of weird stuff. But we went in there and we did the heavy lift because we saw that there was value there, right? We saw there was value in rental increases. This is not a charity. And so I think you'll see more stuff like that. We've transformed this whole, you can Google it, it's called Stanton Road in Little Rock. When you Google it, there's like a stabbing, shooting, drug bust, blah, 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 blah. And we've single-handedly booted all those. We've had to tear down two trailers because they had meth labs in them. We had to tear down a trailer because they had a brothel in it. We had to, on that road. So we've single-handedly transformed that road. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but you're going to start seeing more stuff like that. So I think that's the kind of the end of the movie with mobile home parks and kind of where the asset class is going. More professional and a safer place, cleaner place to live.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, rent control often forces slumlord type situations because you just can't, like, the expenses, that expense ratio that you've spoken about, like the expenses are going up. So if the rent doesn't go up, then something gets cut out, right? Like, so if you can't, you can't spend money on making it a nicer place to live. And it's just, that's just, it's unfortunate. It'd be nice, I guess, if everybody could live in live cheaply and whatever. But I just don't think it's a reality of housing. Things need to be fixed. You want things to be upgraded, all of that. And it's, so over time, those prices have to go up, and they sort of have to correlate with whatever where everything else is going. So yeah, I don't know that there's a perfect solution or answer to that problem, but I agree with you. It's just kind of the way to make things better. The way to make it a nicer place to live is to put some, put some capital into it and improve things. Um,
I was gonna
Go ahead.
I was just going to touch on that point as well. There's a gentleman named Charles Becker. He's an economist at Duke University, and you can go look him up. He wrote about how and I'm stealing this from a gentleman named Frank Rolfe, who's kind of the godfather of mobile home parks. He runs Mobile Home Park University, and he's a sharp guy. He owns 20,000 pads nationwide, and is super, super sharp guy. But he called it mom and pop quantitative easing. And what I mean by that is Charles Becker, he said that with inflation, since most of these properties have gotten bought, the average lot rent nationwide should be somewhere between 500 and 525. The average lot rent right now is about 300 nationwide. So we're about $225 kind of below even where inflation is or has been and still is going. And so that's kind of what he said. And he's, Duke economist. I think he's a pretty sharp guy, and I don't disagree with him. A lot of these mom and pop owners, they kept rents kind of artificially low for a long time. So I think there's some catch up to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tyler, let me switch gears here so I don't keep you all night. I want to get to ask you the questions I ask every guest. The first one is based on the name of the show being Know Your Why, but what's your why? What's driving you? You're having success. What kind of keeps you going, keeps you excited about this stuff?
Yeah, I've always wanted to build a company. I'm kind of I don't know if a builder's correct. I hate to put myself into the realm of like the Elon Musk's and the Jeff Bezos of the world, but I've always kind of wanted to build something big. And I don't know, mobile home parks seemed like a good vehicle to kind of build that business, build that that kind of big business. Because I noticed just something about me at like kind of an early age. I needed something hard on a daily basis, so I didn't feel accomplished. I always kind of had to push it. I've always been on combat sports, so whether that's boxing or jujitsu or whatever, and I've always felt like that was kind of always a calling because it's like it's mano a mano, and you kind of leave it all out there on the mat or in the ring or whatever. I've always just kind of needed that push, and it's going to sound a little petty, but I do love proving people wrong that said I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I do love that. Yeah,
I think that is. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that's petty at all. I think it. I mean, and it's like, it's not. Well, I'm sure it is somewhat about sort of proving them, but it's like proving to yourself that they're wrong, that they were wrong. Like
yep.
Because probably when people say you can't do something, a little bit of us says, what if they're right? But so it's almost more about like making sure that in your own head that you that you believe that they're not right, and oh, by the way, they get to see it. So it's a pretty cool it is a pretty cool feeling. I agree.
Yeah, I heard sorry, Jason, I know you were going to go to the next question. I was just going to say I heard a really cool quote the other day, and it was your haters are out there holding their breath, waiting for you to fail. Make sure they suffocate.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's a good one.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
Yeah.
And you may have already sort of prelude to this next question, but the next question is typically tell us something about yourself that maybe isn't common knowledge, a special skill or a hobby. You already mentioned that you like boxing, jiu-jitsu. That I don't know if there's something else you want to add to that, but I just think it's good for people to hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty boring. It's usually boxing, jiu-jitsu, the gym, work, and more work. So I eat, sleep, and work out. I think exercise is a super important daily ritual for me. But I don't. I'm pretty consistent and boring, and just kind of go through the reps every day. Try and get better. It's like 10,000 hours or whatever they said to be an expert at something. So
exactly.
That's kind of my life. So I wish I had something else I was doing that was a nonprofit or something else that was a calling, but that's what I do.
No, there's definitely no right answers. That's great. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Yeah, we've got you can reach out to me on my email. It's Tyler at mhcigroup.com. And we post some pretty funny stuff on LinkedIn, informative and funny. Like I served a lady who looked like Brian Urlacher an eviction notice early on, and she took a swing at me and then fell down her steps and chased me out of the property. And anyways, so we got some funny stuff like that on our LinkedIn. So people might find it useful because we definitely do tie in operational efficiencies and whatnot like that in there. But we also got some interesting content. It's all not just boring stuff.
Yeah.
So you can follow us on LinkedIn at MHCI Group or Tyler Lekas. You can just find me on there and give me a follow. But other than that, I don't really have social media, so I LinkedIn or bust basically. So
Yeah.
Email me or hit me on LinkedIn.
Good to focus on one anyway. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Final question for you. Someone hears this, they're inspired, they're thinking they might want to get started in mobile home parks. What would you tell them?
I would tell them that the most important thing when you first get started is to make sure you build a database of owners that you are contacting the owner specifically. Because if you just look up the address and then the phone number for the park, you're never going to get a hold of the owner. You got to find who actually owns the property, then find out. Once you find that owner, then you got to basically skip trace them, find out their phone number and their email, and you got to do that at scale, so that you can go find off-market leads. Because if you try and buy something on market and you're just starting out, you just don't have the capital bandwidth to withstand a 7 cap or a 6 cap in this interest rate environment. You got to buy stuff at way better deals than that. How you do that is you find stuff off market that brokers have not found. That's what I'd recommend, and that's what we did. So
awesome.
That's it.
Awesome. Well, listen, Tyler, this has been fantastic. I think people are going to love this. I've learned a ton. I appreciate you sharing your story, teaching us so much about mobile home parks and some good stories there. So thank you for taking the time out. I appreciate it very much.
Hey, thank you, Jason. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests like Tyler. And thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?